Imagine pouring your heart into a dream, only for the person who's supposed to support you to crush it completely. Imagine receiving your college acceptance letter, the ticket to your future, only to have it ripped away and thrown in the trash by someone you trusted. Years go by, you struggle, you fight, you prove yourself, and then, life twists in a way you never expected. The same person who tried to stop you walks into your office, desperate for your help. What would you do? Before we start, comment below: if someone tried to hold you back, would you forgive them or let them face the consequences? I still remember the day like it happened yesterday. I was 17, trembling with excitement, my hands clutching the crisp envelope that held my future. My college acceptance letter, the culmination of years of late nights, sacrifices, and silent determination, stared back at me with its bold, golden seal. I had dreamed of this moment for so long, and finally it had come, but that joy lasted only seconds. My stepmom, Martha, barged into my room with that typical look of condescension that always made me feel small. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the envelope in my shaking hands. "Oh, that again?" she said, tossing her head and smirking. "Do you really think you're going anywhere with that? You'll fail, just like everything else you try." I froze, stunned. "It's my acceptance letter, I worked so hard," she snorted. "Worked hard? Don't make me laugh, you're never going to amount to anything, might as well save us all the trouble." Before I could react, she snatched the envelope from my hands. My heart stopped. "Martha, no, that's mine." She held it over the trash can like it was nothing. "You'll never need this, not now, not ever." I lunged for it, but she was faster. With a swift motion, she tossed it into the trash, laughing as if she had just performed some grand victory. My stomach twisted, my throat burned, and tears welled up in my eyes. I remember sitting on my bed for hours after that, staring at the floor, trying to hold myself together. That day, I didn't just lose a piece of paper, I lost the validation of someone I had hoped would believe in me. From that moment on, I knew I had to fight harder than anyone could imagine. If they wouldn't support me, I'd make sure I didn't need them. Years passed. Every rejection, every late night of studying, every job I took to pay for college tuition alone became a brick in the fortress I was building around myself. And slowly, painstakingly, I climbed. From community college to law school, from internships to my own legal practice, I forged a life that no one could take away from me except maybe by walking in that office door one day. And then, one crisp morning, I heard the soft chime of the office door. I looked up from my desk, and there she was, my stepmom. Older, frailer, her smug confidence replaced by something I hadn't expected: desperation. In her hand was a crumpled legal form, her eyes darting nervously around the office like a child caught stealing. I didn't move, I just stared. The years of humiliation, ridicule, and the memory of that shredded letter flashed before me. And yet, there she was, standing in the office of the very lawyer she never believed I could become. "I need your help," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't know who else to turn to." For a moment, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The power dynamic had shifted completely. The girl she humiliated was gone. In her place stood a woman she had never imagined could exist, strong, confident, and untouchable, at least in this room. But the question that hung between us was heavier than any of the paperwork she'd brought. Could I forgive her, or would I let her face the consequences of the person she used to be? The office was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner and the soft scratch of pens against paper. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, my mind spinning as I tried to steady my breathing. Martha hesitated for a moment, her hands twisting nervously in front of her, before she lowered herself onto the leather seat. I know you're angry," she said finally, her voice small, almost pleading. "And you have every right to be." Anger, yes, I could feel it bubbling under the surface, a slow simmering heat that hadn't left me in years. The memory of that letter, shredded and tossed away like it was nothing, was still raw, but beneath the anger was something else, something darker, the quiet satisfaction of knowing that life had given me the upper hand this time. "I am angry," I admitted, my voice calm but edged with steel. "Do you have any idea what it felt like to be thrown aside, to have my future destroyed by someone who was supposed to care about me?" Her eyes filled with tears, and I saw the first cracks in the facade she had always maintained. I made mistakes," she whispered. "I didn't realize, I thought." "You thought what?" I cut in sharply. "That destroying me would make your life easier? That telling me I'd never amount to anything would stop me from trying. She flinched, her hands gripping the chair tightly. No, I never meant for it to go that far, her voice broke, I didn't know how to handle you, how to support you, how to. For the first time in my life, I saw vulnerability where there had once been arrogance. The woman who had laughed at my dreams was now trembling before me, asking for help from the very person she had tried to break. And now, I said slowly, letting the weight of my words sink in, you need my help. After everything, you come to me because there's no one else, and I'm supposed to just forgive and assist you. She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears. I know I don't deserve it, but please. I don't know what else to do. You're the only one who can help me with this legal issue. I've tried other lawyers, but they won't take my case. I need you. The irony was almost unbearable. I, the girl she had called a failure, was now her only option. The thought of the power shift was intoxicating, but so was the memory of the pain she had caused me. I stood, walking slowly around my desk to face her more closely. You want my help and you expect me to forget the years of humiliation, the nights of tears, the sleepless nights wondering if I'd ever make it? Her hands reached out instinctively, but she stopped herself. I'm sorry, I know it's not enough, I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make it right now. I felt a flicker of something inside me, pity? Perhaps, or maybe it was the first hint of understanding. Life had a strange way of balancing itself, and here we were, forced into the same room, roles reversed. The student had become the teacher, the victim had become the authority, and the oppressor, well, now she was human, fragile, vulnerable. I sat back down, letting the silence stretch between us. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, yet in that quiet I realized something important. This wasn't just about revenge or pride. It was about control, about reclaiming my life and my voice. And I would decide, on my terms, if helping her was a part of that. Finally, I spoke. We'll talk terms, not out of mercy, not because I forgive you, but because I know what needs to be done, and I'm the one who decides how it's done. She nodded, swallowing hard, a mix of fear and relief in her eyes. Thank you, I don't know how to repay you. You don't repay me, I said firmly. You follow my rules. And maybe, just maybe, you learn what it feels like to be taken seriously for once. As I watched her nod in agreement, I felt the first true spark of power in years, not the power of wealth, not the power of success, but the power of choice, the choice to decide my own story, my own ending, and this was only the beginning. The following morning I arrived at the office with a sense of reluctant anticipation. The case files Martha had brought were sprawled across my desk, contracts, court notices, and stacks of legal paperwork that had been ignored for months. Each sheet told a story of mistakes, negligence, and desperation, but beneath the black and white text I couldn't escape the swirling emotions that had nothing to do with law. As I picked up the first file, my mind drifted back to the day she threw away my college acceptance letter. I could almost feel the weight of that envelope in my hands again, my pulse racing as she ripped it from me like she was taking something vital because she had. That single act had redirected my life in ways I hadn't fully understood until now. Every hardship, every late-night study session, every paycheck spent scraping by, it was all a response to her disbelief, her ridicule, her sheer cruelty. I shook my head trying to focus. The files on my desk were pressing, and for the first time the past and present collided in a way I couldn't ignore. Martha hovered nervously by the door, shifting from one foot to another, clearly unsure if she belonged in my office at all. Sit down, I said, finally breaking the silence. We'll start with the facts, dates, deadlines, contracts, everything. She complied, and I could see the tension in her shoulders. I haven't been good with any of this, she admitted, her voice low. I never should have let it get this far. I opened the first file and began reading aloud. You missed the filing for the property dispute by 6 months. The other lawyer you hired failed to submit proper documentation, and the opposing counsel has already submitted motions that could severely weaken your case. Her hands trembled as she took the documents from me. I didn't know what I was doing, she whispered. I didn't have anyone to guide me. I leaned back in my chair, watching her fidget. Funny, I said, almost bitterly, because I didn't have anyone either. No guidance, no support, and yet I survived. I built a life from nothing while I caught myself, my throat tightening while you tried to break me at every turn. Her face crumpled as if the weight of my words physically pressed down on her. I was wrong. Every time I tried to control you to keep you small, I just made everything worse. I can't undo the past. I stared at her, studying the woman who had shaped so much of my pain. The anger I had carried for years surged briefly, that bitter, acidic anger that had fueled my drive. And yet, intertwined with it, there was something else. A complicated fascination with seeing her falter, seeing her dependent on the very person she had attempted to crush. I pushed the files closer to her. Then let's fix this, but make no mistake, I'm doing this on my terms. You will follow my instructions exactly. Every detail, every deadline, every motion, you do what I say. Understood? Yes, she whispered, almost too softly. For hours we worked. I guided her through each document, pointed out flaws, and instructed her on corrections. As we delved deeper into the case, I noticed something subtle happening, a shift in the balance of power. She was no longer the woman who dismissed me as insignificant. She was now at my mercy, following my lead, trusting my judgment, and relying on my intellect in ways she had never imagined. Yet, despite the growing satisfaction I felt, the memories of my teenage self kept surfacing. I remembered the nights I cried alone in my bedroom, the countless times I questioned whether I was enough. And now, years later, I was the one holding all the cards, the one who could either help her rise or let her fall. It was intoxicating and terrifying. During a brief pause, she dared to ask, "Do you hate me?" I looked at her, the question lingering like smoke in the room. Hate? Maybe for a moment back then. But this isn't about hate anymore. It's about justice. It's about making sure the mistakes you made don't destroy everything else in your life. That's what I care about now. The consequences, the responsibility, not the emotions. Her shoulders slumped, relief mingling with guilt on her face. She was learning, slowly, that I was no longer the powerless girl she had dominated. And as I watched her, I realized something crucial. This case wasn't just about her legal problems, it was about rewriting the story of our relationship, piece by piece, with me in control for the first time ever. Hours passed, the office lights dimmed. Outside, the city moved on, oblivious to the battle unfolding in my small corner of the world. And yet, for me, time had stopped. Each word, each corrected form, each instruction I gave reminded me of how far I had come, how unstoppable I had become despite her attempts to hold me back. Finally, as I closed the last folder for the day, Martha looked at me, eyes wide with something between awe and fear. You've become someone I never expected," she whispered. I smiled faintly, leaning back in my chair, exhaustion mixing with a sharp sense of triumph. "And you're finally seeing the consequences of underestimating me. That's the difference between who I was and who I am now." There was a long silence, filled only by the soft hum of the office and the distant murmur of traffic outside. In that silence I understood, the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, the past and present collided in a way that felt just, and the story I had been forced to live as a powerless girl was finally being rewritten by the woman I had become. The next morning, I arrived at the office before dawn, the city still cloaked in a soft gray haze. The quiet hum of the elevators and the faint smell of coffee in the lobby reminded me how far I'd come, how different life was from that 17-year-old girl clutching a rejection letter, trembling with humiliation. Today, I wasn't that girl anymore. Today, I had power, clarity, and a mission. Martha was already at her desk, hovering over her notes. Her hands shook slightly as I entered, a subtle reminder that she was still the same person who once held me back, yet now fully dependent on my guidance. "I need the full story," I said, voice sharp but controlled. "Why did you throw my acceptance letter away? Why try to destroy my future like that?" Her eyes widened and she glanced down at the paperwork as if hiding behind it would protect her. I didn't know what I was doing. I thought college would just ruin your life, take you away from family, from me. I made a mistake, a huge mistake." I felt a cold edge in my chest, the same one I'd felt all those years ago, when her excuses fell flat against the truth of my lost opportunities. Protecting me? Because all I remember is shame, humiliation, and a future that was stolen from me. She flinched. I know now, and I've regretted it every single day." I took a deep breath, leaning over her desk. "Do you understand what that letter meant, what it could have done for me?" She swallowed hard. I don't fully, I see it now, Ava, I see it more clearly than I ever did, but I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought you weren't ready, and I didn't want you to fail." I shook my head slowly. You don't get to decide that, you never did. You never gave me a chance, and that's why I'm here now, because I am taking control of what you tried to destroy. For a long moment she didn't speak. Her shoulders slumped as if the weight of my words were too heavy for her to carry. I could see the fear and shame etched into her face, but beneath it there was also a flicker of something else, the realization that the tables had turned. I turned back to the files. Each one revealed more than just negligence, they revealed a pattern of avoidance and dishonesty. Contracts she'd signed without understanding, missed deadlines and half-hearted efforts that had left her vulnerable. I felt a rush of vindication, and yet it wasn't enough just to win. I needed the truth, every detail, so I could decide whether there was room for forgiveness or if this was simply a lesson in consequences. Start from the beginning, I said. Every decision, every missed filing, every shortcut. I want to know why this happened, down to the last detail. And she told me. Hours passed as she admitted everything, her fear of losing control, her insecurities and the selfish choices that had caused years of chaos. She spoke of panic over the company, anxiety about her reputation, and moments of sheer cowardice that led to my ruined opportunities. By mid-afternoon, I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but more aware than ever. The anger that had fueled me for years now mingled with something I hadn't expected, a strange, careful compassion. Not for her, not yet, but for the truth, for seeing the reasons behind the betrayal laid bare. You realize, I said finally, voice quieter now, that if I had trusted you back then, I would have succeeded anyway. I would have found a way. I always do. You didn't protect me. You tried to cage me, and now you're asking me to save you. Her hands trembled on the desk. Yes, and I don't deserve it. I know that. I never have, but I'm asking anyway. I need your help, Ava. You're the only one who can fix this, the only one who can save us from ruin. I stared at her, the weight of the past and the gravity of the present colliding. Here she was, desperate, exposed, finally vulnerable in a way I had never seen. And yet the old scars remained, the years of struggle, of building a life without her, of proving everyone wrong. I exhaled slowly. Fine, I'll help you, but we do this on my terms. Every decision, every step I lead, you follow, understood? Yes, she whispered, relief and fear mingling in her voice. The rest of the day was a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and strategy planning. I mapped out a recovery plan detailing what needed to be done to salvage her life and the company, while keeping complete control in my hands. Every time she hesitated, I reminded her gently but firmly that I was no longer the powerless girl she had underestimated. By evening, the office was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Martha sat slumped in her chair, exhausted yet visibly learning. And I felt the strange thrill of power tempered with an unspoken question: could someone who had caused so much pain truly deserve redemption? For now, I didn't have an answer. But one thing was clear: the story that began with a destroyed college letter was far from over, and I was determined to see it through on my terms, with justice and control firmly in my grasp. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of my office, casting stripes of light across the polished floor. Coffee in hand, I sat at my desk and spread out the files like a battlefield map. Every contract, every missed payment, every weak decision Martha had made was laid bare before me. And for the first time I felt the power of knowing exactly how to fix things, not out of mercy but because I had the skill, the knowledge, and the resolve. Martha arrived late, the weight of last night's admissions still etched on her face. She looked smaller than I remembered, almost fragile, but the desperation in her eyes was sharper than steel. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Sit," I said. My tone was calm, but there was an unspoken edge. "We have a lot of work to do, and I'm not sugarcoating anything. You need to understand that every mistake you made has consequences, and I'm here to make sure you face them correctly, efficiently, and without hurting anyone else more than you already have." She swallowed hard and nodded. "I understand," she whispered. I picked up the first file and slammed it gently on the desk. "This deal, do you know how much money we lost because of your negligence?" Her hands trembled as she adjusted her glasses. I miscalculated some expenses. I didn't think." "You didn't think," I interrupted, my voice rising slightly. "Exactly, that's the problem. You never thought about long-term impact. You were reactive, chaotic, and because of that people trusted you less, clients left, partners hesitated, and now it's on me to salvage it all." Her lips quivered and she looked down. I'm sorry, she said quietly, almost too softly to hear. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. I had heard apologies before. Words meant nothing unless backed by action. Sorry doesn't save a company. Sorry doesn't pay the bills. Sorry doesn't fix the trust you destroyed. You're going to learn how to do this every step, every decision, and if you can't, I'll take over completely. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I'll do whatever it takes, I want to make it right. And that's when the real work began. We spent hours going through every document, untangling contracts, renegotiating deadlines, and repairing relationships with clients. I watched her carefully, correcting mistakes, teaching her to anticipate consequences, showing her how to act decisively instead of hesitating. At first she resisted, small excuses, little delays, the faint tremor of fear in her voice whenever I pushed her, but slowly she started to catch on. I could see the gears turning in her mind, the dawning realization that she had underestimated what it took to survive in the real world, to truly own responsibility. By noon, we were in the thick of a high-stakes negotiation with a client she had mishandled months ago. My heart raced as I guided her through the conversation, coaching her on tone, phrasing, and the subtle balance between authority and humility. Remember, I whispered from the side, you can't just apologize. You have to show competence, confidence that you can fix this. She nodded, taking a deep breath. And then, like magic, she did it. The client listened, he nodded, he agreed. And for the first time, I saw her stand tall, not out of fear but out of earned respect. It was intoxicating, the rush of watching someone who once humiliated me now learning, faltering, and slowly rising under my guidance. Yet beneath it all, the ache of the past lingered. The memory of the shredded college letter, the lost opportunities, the years of doubt, they fueled me, reminded me why I could never fully forgive. That evening, after a marathon day, we sat exhausted in my office. Martha's eyes were red, her hands calloused from signing endless documents. I don't know if I would have gotten this far without you, she admitted, voice small. I leaned back, sipping my coffee. Or maybe you just needed someone to show you what real accountability looks like. She flinched but nodded. I'll keep learning, I want to be better, I want to make things right. I studied her face. For all the fear, shame, and regret, there was now a spark of determination, a faint glimmer of respect for me, for herself, for what had to be done. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't just teaching her to fix her mistakes. I was reclaiming the power she had tried to steal from me all those years ago. The day ended with the city skyline glowing through the office windows. The weight of the past still lingered, but a path forward had begun, one built on rules I set, lessons she had to learn, and a clear reminder that power and success came from resilience, not excuses. And deep inside, I felt the tiniest flicker of something I hadn't felt in years: control. Real, undeniable control. The next morning, the city felt colder, harsher, and somehow smaller. I arrived at the office early, as usual, but today wasn't about paperwork or negotiations. Today was about consequences. Martha shuffled into the building a few minutes later, looking worn and nervous. Her carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the lines of stress or the tremor in her hands. She avoided my gaze, but I didn't give her the comfort of ignoring the past. Follow me, I said, my voice neutral, almost clinical. There was no room for apologies this time, only actions. We walked past familiar offices, past colleagues who whispered and stared. Word had spread quickly, the daughter who had been written off was now running the show. Heads turned, eyes widened, and I could feel the weight of everyone's judgment pressing down on us both. We arrived at the conference room where a client meeting had been scheduled. One Martha had mishandled months ago, almost causing the company to collapse. I gestured for her to enter. Sit, I commanded softly. You're going to take responsibility for this. Her lips parted as if to protest, but I cut her off. No, you will face it, not for me, not for pity. For your own survival. You failed before, now you fix it or you fall again. She swallowed and nodded, trembling. I could see the panic in her eyes, the fear of exposure, but I also saw determination flicker. This was her trial by fire, and I would be the one to temper it. The client arrived. He was impatient, cold, his voice dripping with irritation at the delays and mishandlings. Martha flinched at his first words, her hands tightening into fists in her lap. Ms. Harper, he snapped, I don't understand how your office keeps making these mistakes. My patience is nearly gone. I leaned against the doorframe, silent but watchful. Speak, I said, my single word carrying authority. Martha drew a shaky breath. You're right, she began. Her voice was quiet at first, almost fragile. I mishandled your case before. I made errors that should never have happened, and I understand if you want to take your business elsewhere. The man's eyes narrowed, but she held her ground. I've reviewed every detail, I've corrected the oversights. I've implemented new checks and balances to ensure this doesn't happen again, and I personally guarantee your next project will meet and exceed expectations. I watched closely as he considered her words. The tension in the room was suffocating. And then something shifted. The edge in his voice softened, just slightly. He nodded once. Very well, I'll give you another chance, but this is it. Relief washed over Martha's face, but I didn't let her relax. Not yet. This wasn't about praise, it was about accountability. Good, I said finally. Now let's talk about how this could have been avoided. You're going to explain step by step to me, to the client, where the failures were, why they happened, and how you'll prevent them in the future. Don't just fix it, understand it. Hours passed, we dissected every mistake, every miscommunication, every oversight, and through it all I pushed her further than she thought she could go. Her frustration grew, yes, but so did her understanding. By the end of the day, she had learned more than months of superficial training could have taught her, but it wasn't just her growth that mattered. Watching her confront her failures, I confronted my own demons too. The years of shame, the nights I had spent believing I would never be enough, the lingering anger at how much she had tried to control and belittle me. It was exhausting, it was raw, it was painful. And yet, as the day closed, I realized something important. I was no longer the powerless child who had once cried over a shredded college letter. I was Ava Morgan, the one who demanded accountability, the one who had the power to guide, correct, and rebuild. Martha looked at me with a mix of fear, awe, and something else, perhaps the first real spark of respect. But only if you keep proving it. Actions speak louder than words, and today you've started. Keep going, don't stop. Not for me, for yourself. We left the conference room in silence. The city lights were dimming as night approached, but for the first time I felt the weight of the past lighten just slightly. The reckoning wasn't over, it never would be fully, but a path forward had begun. One where power was earned, mistakes were faced, and respect was no longer optional. And deep down, I knew that even if she stumbled again, I had already won something far greater, the knowledge that I could rise above every attempt to diminish me. That the girl they tried to destroy had not only survived, she had learned to command her world. The morning after the reckoning, the office felt different. The air was thick with unspoken truths, lingering tension, and a fragile sense of possibility. I arrived early, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor, each step a reminder that the daughter they once dismissed had become someone unstoppable. Martha was already at her desk, reviewing documents with a meticulousness I had never seen before. She glanced up as I passed, her eyes a mixture of apprehension and determination. I could almost see her bracing herself, as if expecting me to strike at any moment. But I didn't. Not today. Morning, I said, my tone neutral but carrying authority. Morning, she replied, her voice steady though her hands fidgeted with a pen. We didn't speak about yesterday at first. There was no need, the memory of our confrontation lingered in the air like smoke, thick and impossible to ignore. Instead, we plunged straight into work. Reports, contracts, client updates, every detail mattered. Every decision carried weight. By midday, a new challenge emerged. A major client had called, threatening to pull out unless immediate corrective measures were taken. Martha flinched at the news, but this time she didn't retreat. She turned to me, her eyes meeting mine, searching for guidance but also showing a flicker of confidence I hadn't noticed before. We can handle this, she said quietly. I can fix it. I studied her carefully. There was fear, yes, but beneath it a glimmer of something else, a willingness to rise, to prove she wasn't the person she had been months ago. Good, I said. Then start fixing it, walk me through your plan. Hours passed in a blur of strategy sessions, phone calls, and crisis management. Martha suggested solutions I hadn't considered, showing creativity, resourcefulness, and a level of accountability that made my chest tighten not from pride but from disbelief. The woman who had once tried to hold me back was now rising to meet the challenge, and in doing so she forced me to confront my own feelings about her. By late afternoon we had stabilized the situation. The client was appeased, the team motivated, and the company's reputation salvaged. But it wasn't just a professional victory. Something had shifted between Martha and me. A thin thread of trust, tentative and delicate, had begun to form. "You did well today," I said, watching her lean back in her chair, exhausted but satisfied. "Thanks," she replied softly. I never imagined I could do this. I never imagined you'd. I don't know, give me a chance." I let the silence stretch between us, letting her words settle. "I do results, and today you delivered. Keep proving it." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She had learned the first lesson of surviving in my world. Respect is earned, not given. As the sun set, painting the office in streaks of gold and crimson, I realized something profound. For the first time in years, I wasn't just confronting my past, I was rewriting it. I had the power to decide who stayed and who left, who thrived and who faltered. And in that moment, I understood that the stepmother who had once been my tormentor could also become an ally, if she was willing to fight for it. And deep down, I sensed that our journey was far from over. The company still had challenges ahead, but the most unpredictable battle, the one within our family, had only just begun. The following week, the office was buzzing with the kind of energy that only comes when someone shakes up the status quo. The employees were nervous, excited, some curious, others cautious, but nothing matched the tension simmering between me and Martha. She had started taking real initiative, showing competence I hadn't dared to hope for, and yet I couldn't ignore the memory of every betrayal, every lie, every moment she had tried to sabotage me. Trust, I realized, wasn't something that could be rebuilt overnight. It had to be earned, and each day was a test. The morning started with a client crisis, one that could cost the company millions if mishandled. Martha stepped forward immediately, proposing a bold solution. Her voice wavered at first but then steadied as she outlined her plan. I watched her carefully, assessing every word, every nuance, every hesitation. This was the moment to decide, do I intervene or let her prove herself? "You're going to lead this," I told her firmly. "I'm not stepping in unless absolutely necessary. Show me you can handle it." Her eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. I can do this," she said. Hours passed as she negotiated contracts, reassured anxious clients, and coordinated with teams across multiple departments. The pressure was immense, and I could see her struggle, yet she persisted, adapting, correcting mistakes in real time. By the end of the day, the client situation was stabilized. Martha had succeeded, but the relief was short-lived. As we left the office, the city lights casting long shadows across the streets, I felt the weight of the next challenge pressing down on me. "Martha," I said carefully, my voice low and measured, "I need to ask you something personal." She looked at me, wary, expecting confrontation. "Do you understand why I can't fully trust you yet?" I asked. Her lips trembled. "Yes," she admitted. "I've made too many mistakes, hurt too many people, including you." I nodded. "This isn't just about the company, it's about me, about everything I lost because of you. You were part of my torment, and now you're part of my life again. That's complicated." Her eyes softened, regret evident, but I could also see determination. "I know I can't change the past, but I want to prove I can be different, that I can help, not hurt." I studied her face, searching for deceit, for weakness, for any hint that this was a performance. There was none. Only a raw, fragile attempt at redemption. "Good," I said finally, "but understand this, your actions will determine how close you get. One misstep, one lie, and you're out. Completely." She swallowed hard, nodding. "I understand." The next few weeks tested both of us. External threats to the company began to surface, aggressive competitors trying to take advantage of our restructuring, clients questioning the leadership change, and internal sabotage from old board members resistant to change. Through it all, Martha proved herself capable, reliable, and increasingly resilient. But trust remained a fragile thread. Every success she achieved was tempered by the memory of past betrayals. Every smile she offered was measured against the pain she had caused. And every step forward forced me to confront my own emotions. Could I forgive fully, or would the past always shadow the present? One evening, as I stayed late in the office reviewing financial reports, Martha approached cautiously. "Ava, can I talk to you?" "Of course," I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. She sat down, hands clasped tightly. I want you to know that I don't take this second chance lightly. I know I don't deserve it, and I know I have to earn your trust every single day." I looked at her for a long moment, seeing the sincerity etched in every line of her face. Actions speak louder than words, Martha. Keep proving yourself, and maybe someday trust will follow. She nodded, her eyes glistening. I will. I promise. As she left the office, I sat back, letting the weight of the day settle. This was the turning point, a delicate balance between forgiveness and caution, power and vulnerability. The journey wasn't over, the challenges weren't over, but for the first time I glimpsed the possibility of rebuilding not just the company but something deeper, a fractured family, a chance for redemption and perhaps a tentative bond that could survive even the harshest storms. And I realized something crucial: letting someone back into your life wasn't weakness, it was strategy, it was courage, and it was the only way to truly reclaim control of your story. The invitation had been mine, carefully worded, deliberate, and impossible to misinterpret. Martha would be attending her first official family gathering under my roof, under my rules, and yes, I'd made it clear she wasn't here to reclaim a place, she was here to observe, to prove herself, and to understand the boundaries she had once violated. The night arrived and I spent hours preparing. The house smelled faintly of lemon and rosemary, candles flickered in glass holders along the mantel, and the table was set immaculately, every detail a reflection of the life I had built without them. My father and biological mother were due any minute, and tension hung thick in the air. When they arrived, the expressions on their faces were priceless, awe mixed with disbelief, and a trace of fear. They had always assumed I would bend or break under pressure, but this dinner was proof that I had grown stronger, sharper, untouchable. Martha entered behind me, quiet, composed, yet visibly tense. She kept her eyes on me, as if seeking guidance, reassurance, and permission to navigate this minefield. I gave a subtle nod, her cue to remain measured and cautious. The dinner began civilly enough, polite small talk, awkward smiles, and half-hearted attempts at humor. But as soon as the topic of the company came up, the room shifted. Old habits die hard. I still don't understand how you think you can run a business, my father muttered under his breath, his tone tinged with incredulity. You dropped out, you've never done anything serious before. I looked up slowly, the weight of years of silence and dismissal pressing on my chest. Funny, I said, calm but sharp. I started my own company from nothing. Built it up from a one-bedroom apartment, invested every ounce of my time, energy, and money, and it's thriving. Perhaps you've noticed, silence fell. My father's jaw tightened, my mother's hands trembled slightly. Martha's eyes flicked nervously to mine, and I gave her a subtle glance, steady, commanding, but protective. Then came the unspoken truth: resentment, buried for decades, began surfacing. My father, flustered and cornered, tried to regain authority with sharp words. My mother attempted placating gestures, but the anger in her eyes betrayed her. And Martha, who had once been my adversary, now sat quietly, listening, learning, taking cues, showing restraint. By the time dessert was served, emotions had swelled into a quiet storm. I had held my ground, asserting my dominance, but without cruelty. My words cut precisely, leaving no room for misinterpretation. Respect must be earned, past actions do not disappear, and power is no longer theirs to wield over me. And yet, amid the tension, a subtle shift occurred. My mother, for the first time, looked at me not as a child or a failure, but as a woman capable of commanding her own life, her own business, her own destiny. And Martha, she had survived the evening, learned the rhythm of our dynamics, and began to see that the daughter she had once underestimated had become a force she could respect, if not yet fully trust. As the night drew to a close, I cleared the dishes quietly, leaving them to process the events in their own way. I caught Martha's gaze as she lingered near the doorway. There was something unspoken between us now: recognition, acknowledgement, a fragile trust that had survived its first real test. Not bad, I murmured. Not bad, she asked, uncertain. Not bad at all, I said, a faint smile tugging at my lips. You made it through without destroying yourself or me. That's progress. She nodded, relief and pride mingling in her expression. And for the first time, I allowed myself to consider that perhaps this partnership, so unlikely, so fraught with history, could lead to something more. A bond not of blood or obligation, but of respect, strength, and shared purpose. The night ended with no dramatic reconciliation, no grand declarations of love or forgiveness, only the quiet, uneasy acknowledgement that the past had been confronted, the present had been controlled, and the future remained unwritten, but for the first time it might include all of us if we were careful. The morning after the tense family dinner, the city felt different. Even the air seemed charged, like it had absorbed every argument, every unspoken word, every flicker of resentment from the night before. I walked through the glass doors of my office building, heels clicking on the marble floors, and tried to focus on work, but the memory of their faces, my father's stubborn pride, my mother's cautious hope, Martha's tentative determination lingered like a shadow. Then my assistant, Jenna, knocked softly on my office door. Ava, someone's here to see you, it's urgent. Before I could respond, the man stepped into the room, sleek suit, confident stride, and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Miss Morgan, he began, extending a hand I didn't shake immediately. I represent a private equity firm. We've been following your company's progress and we're impressed. We'd like to make you an offer. I raised an eyebrow. Go on. He continued, pacing slightly as if rehearsing his lines. We're prepared to invest $50 million, no strings attached, to expand your company internationally. This is unprecedented. Most CEOs would jump at this opportunity. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, my mind raced. $50 million, expansion, recognition, prestige, everything I had built from scratch, now validated, amplified. And yet, something felt off. And what's the catch? I asked finally. His eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly. No catch, legally speaking, but there's an expectation. We want you to consider bringing in partners, people from your personal life who have a stake in the company, family members if you choose. It would show stability, unity, legacy. The words hit me like a punch. Family, legacy, unity. He didn't know about the history, the betrayal, the years of abandonment, but somehow it felt like he had. I could see it clearly now. The offer wasn't just financial. It was personal, a test, a challenge, an opportunity, and a potential trap. I stood, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the skyline. Could I accept the money? Could I risk inviting my parents further into my life, or would I be opening a door I wasn't ready to walk through? Martha stepped in quietly behind me. Ava, are you thinking about them? I didn't turn to her. Of course I am. Every decision, every offer, every success, it's all tied to the people who tried to destroy me. The people I was forced to survive without. She moved closer, her presence grounding me. You've earned this, you can control how it affects your life, you decide the terms. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every battle, every moment I'd clawed my way back from nothing. $50 million could change everything, but it wouldn't erase the scars. It wouldn't fix trust, it wouldn't give me the family I never had. And yet it also represented something I'd learned to crave: power, independence, and choice. The choice to forgive on my own terms, to embrace success without losing myself, to decide who could come into my life and under what conditions. I'll consider it, I said finally, turning to face the man with a calm, measured expression. But under my conditions, no decisions until I'm ready. And no one, no family, no associates can dictate how I move forward. He nodded, accepting the terms, but I could see the surprise in his eyes. Most people would have jumped at blind opportunity. But I wasn't most people. After he left, Martha stayed behind. You've changed, she said softly. The girl they tried to crush is gone. Ava Morgan is unstoppable. I allowed myself a small smile. Unstoppable, but not reckless, that's the difference. We stood in silence, the office quiet except for the hum of the city below. And for the first time in months I felt a strange sense of peace. The past hadn't been erased, the wounds hadn't fully healed. But I had the power now, the clarity, the control, and the choice to write my own ending. That night I called my parents. Not to gloat, not to lecture, not to prove anything, but to offer a tentative olive branch, a chance to begin rebuilding. Slowly, carefully, on terms that honored the life I had fought to create. Mom, Dad, I'm willing to talk, I said, my voice steady but soft. But this isn't about money, it's about trust, about respect, about a future that includes all of us or none of us. There was a long pause, and then quietly my father whispered, We'll do whatever it takes, Ava. We know we've lost years, but we want to try. For the first time in years I felt hope. Not naive hope, not blind faith, but cautious, deliberate, earned hope. Because I had survived their rejection, I had rebuilt my life, and now, I had the power to decide how to let them back in. The office was quiet that morning, sunlight spilling across the polished floors in warm golden stripes. I sat behind my desk, fingers drumming against the leather surface, staring at the stacks of files and spreadsheets that represented the empire I had built from scratch. The private equity offer still hung in the back of my mind like a distant storm, tempting, powerful, but with consequences I hadn't fully measured. Martha, my ever-patient mentor and confidante, leaned against the doorframe, her expression unreadable. "You've got all the power now," she said softly. "But it's not just about money, is it?" I shook my head. "No, it's never just about money, it's them." My throat tightened as I spoke the words, my chest heavy with the weight of everything my parents had taken from me. The years of abandonment, the lies, the mockery, the nights I spent crying myself to sleep because they told me I was worthless. Martha nodded, silent. She knew there was no easy answer, no shortcut to healing. She had seen me claw my way from that 17-year-old girl who had nothing to the woman who now controlled a multi-million-dollar empire, and she knew that even with all my success, the scars ran deep. I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring down at the bustling city below. "They want a place in my life, Martha, my company, my home, everything I fought for. And I paused, trying to find the words. I want to help them, I want to forgive them, in a way. But I'm not sure if I should let them in fully." The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where decisions are forged, where clarity slowly begins to rise from the chaos of emotion. I thought back to the moment my father had whispered, "We'll do whatever it takes." The sincerity in his voice had been real, raw and trembling, but it didn't erase 14 years of pain. Could I trust them to respect my boundaries? Or would letting them back in unleash old patterns of manipulation and disappointment? I sat down, leaning back in my chair, and closed my eyes. For a long while, I imagined the life I wanted, a life where success didn't come at the cost of my sanity, where forgiveness didn't mean surrender, where love could exist without fear. And then a decision crystallized. When I opened my eyes, I felt a quiet strength, a sense of certainty I hadn't felt in years. I picked up the phone and dialed my parents' number, my hands steady now, my voice calm but firm. "Mom, Dad, I've made a decision," I said, my tone measured. "You can be a part of my life, but only on my terms. Respect my space, respect my work, respect me. We will rebuild slowly, carefully, and we'll do it together, but there are no shortcuts, no old excuses, no assumptions. If you can accept that, then we have a chance." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then my mother's voice, fragile but sincere, whispered, "We can do that, Ava, we will do that. We'll start over however long it takes." My father added, his voice trembling with emotion, "We're ready, Ava, whatever it takes." I felt a strange warmth bloom in my chest, not relief, not yet, but hope, the kind of hope that comes from knowing you have the power to write your own story, to shape your future, and to define the terms of your own healing. Later that afternoon, I walked through the front door of my parents' modest home for the first time in over a decade. The air smelled faintly of vanilla and old wood, familiar, comforting, but still tinged with tension. We moved slowly, cautiously, like dancers testing new steps. Conversations were careful, filled with pauses and tentative smiles. It wasn't perfect, there were still tears, still memories that cut like knives, still moments when old resentment surfaced. But there was also laughter, quiet, cautious, fragile, but real. And with each story shared, each apology acknowledged, each moment of vulnerability, a bridge began to form across the canyon of years that had separated us. I realized then that forgiveness wasn't forgetting, it wasn't erasing the past, it was choosing to move forward despite it, to protect myself while allowing others the chance to show they had changed. By the time I left that evening, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Balance, a fragile, beautiful balance between success and heartache, power and compassion, independence and connection. And though I knew there would be setbacks, that trust would need to be rebuilt over months, maybe years, I also knew one thing with certainty: I had survived their rejection. I had claimed my power, and now I had chosen to reclaim my family, carefully, wisely, and on my terms. For the first time in years, I felt whole. Not because the past was gone, but because I had finally learned that my worth was mine alone to define. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of my apartment, painting the room in soft gold. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, watching the city wake below. For the first time in years, my life felt fully mine. The empire I had built, the company I had rescued, the family I had cautiously let back in, all of it was proof of the woman I had become. There was a knock at the door. I knew who it was before I opened it. My mother, tentative and nervous, stood there with a small bouquet of lilies, a tentative smile on her face. My father lingered behind her carrying a box of homemade pastries, a clumsy but sincere offering. "Morning," I said, letting a small smile slip through. "Morning, Ava," my mother whispered. I wanted to bring something. For you, for everything you've done." I accepted the flowers, feeling a flicker of warmth in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It wasn't forgetting. But it was a beginning, a fragile start to something that could grow. We sat together at the kitchen table, talking quietly, carefully, like adults navigating a landscape of old wounds and new hopes. My parents didn't overstep. They didn't apologize for everything all at once or demand instant closeness. They simply existed in the same space as me, aware of the distance that still lingered but willing to move forward anyway. Hours later, I stepped outside into the crisp air. My phone buzzed, a reminder of an important meeting, my team waiting, emails piling up. My life was busy, demanding, filled with responsibilities that had once seemed impossible, but I no longer felt weighed down by anger or resentment. I carried my scars, yes, but they no longer defined me. Walking down the street, I reflected on everything: the nights of tears, the lonely birthdays, the doors slammed in my face, the failures they had proclaimed I would be. And yet, here I was, stronger, wiser, and unshakably in control of my life. Later that evening, my parents called. I could hear the hesitation in their voices, the awareness that trust needed to be earned every day. "Ava, we just wanted to thank you," my father said softly, "for giving us a chance. We know we don't deserve it yet, but we'll keep trying." I closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "I know," I said, "and I'll let you, slowly, on my terms." That night, as I sat by the window watching the city lights flicker, I realized that healing didn't mean perfection. It didn't mean erasing the past or pretending the pain didn't exist. It meant accepting what had happened, claiming my power, and deciding what relationships were worth keeping and which ones required boundaries. I wasn't naive. I knew the road ahead would have setbacks, but for the first time, I felt at peace with the choices I had made. I had survived their rejection, turned my pain into strength, and discovered a deeper kind of love, one rooted not in obligation but in respect, understanding, and the courage to keep building life on my own terms. I smiled softly to myself. Life was far from perfect, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. As I poured another cup of coffee and looked out over the skyline, I whispered quietly, "I am Ava Morgan, I am enough, and this is just the beginning." The screen of life didn't promise perfection, but it did promise growth, resilience, and hope, and that was a story worth living.